Welcome to the Awakening Together channel here on YouTube. This is our Awakening Together weekly gathering. Each and every week we have a different minister who speaks. If you'd like to attend our services live, please visit our website awakening-together.org. Click on Online Sanctuary on the main menu. Then, How to Enter the Sanctuary. Our services are held Sundays at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. We'd love to see you in the sanctuary.
Great. Thank you so much, Sina. Can you all hear me okay? Great. Super. That's one housekeeping behind us. I do want to welcome you all this morning and wish you a wonderful morning. I am so delighted to be here, so excited to be delivering my first homily. You could say I waited 5 years to do this. I've been a member of Awakening Together for a while and became a minister recently and resisted giving a homily. I went fighting and screaming, and all of a sudden it occurred to me, it's probably what I've been waiting for. So I resisted the resistance and ignored it, and here I am, diving in with both feet. So thank you all for being here for this momentous occasion for little old me. We will have a chance to greet each other in the chat room in just a couple of minutes, but I would like to draw your attention to a couple of items first. First of all, we are here every Sunday at the same time. We gather together as Awakening members and lovers of Christ and all teachings, all spiritual teachings. And I'd like to begin with our purpose, our statement of purpose. We are an assembly of equals joined in common purpose, awakening to one true self. Within an appearance of many faiths, many cultures, and many symbols, we seek to discern one truth and to rest in its embrace. And I'd also like to take just a few moments to remember a modern day mystic who passed away this last week, Thich Nhat Hanh, whose earthly body passed on January the 21st at the age of 95. He was a Buddhist monk. He died at his home peacefully in Vietnam. And he was considered a main inspiration for engaged Buddhism. In fact, there is actually an MPP course designed around his teachings, which is a wonderful, wonderful work. He was a champion of peace and probably someone who would not want to have a lot of words said about him upon his earthly death. But there was one social media post that really caught my eye and caught my heart, written by one of his students named Shantum Seth. And if you'll draw your attention to that with me, it's very short, but it's very sweet. He writes, "Today my heart is deeply pained with grief, and yet I know that Thai is continuing to teach and nourish us. I feel him in every conscious breath and step, and I see him in many forms. Another day is over, and as I hear the rain outside in Noida, I am reminded again of Thai himself saying, 'I am a continuation, like the rain is the continuation of the cloud.' He writes, 'With prostrations of gratitude and deep respect to my beloved teacher.'" And if we could take just a moment of silence to remember our beloved Thich Nhat Hanh. Thank you. Thank you, teacher. The name of the title I gave to my homily this morning is Living the Questions That Point to Truth, which is really all about being present, forgetting everything that has ever come, that ever comes through our lives, and focusing in on presence, being still. The core value is the one I picked is number 5. The one that picked me was number 5. It is, we accept all forms as temporary appearances permitted through enduring awareness of self. We live this value by honoring all appearances and all experiences while continually reflecting on changeless truth. I'd like to tell you a little bit about why I picked this title before we go any further, because it actually came from a quote that was offered to me at a time when the rug was literally pulled out from under my life as I knew it then. Everything familiar was changing. Everything I knew had disappeared almost overnight. It was about 5 years ago, and I'll keep this really short, that my husband began experiencing some major health problems, beginning with a traumatic brain injury that needed surgery, had to relearn to walk and think. And 6 months later, we found out he needed open heart surgery. He had a massive stroke during that surgery. And again, we were learning how to walk, how to be, and, kind of tinkering on whether he would stay or go. And there was a quote that someone gave me. It's from Maria Rilke, and it's from a letter to a young poet. And in a time of total uncertainty in my life, this crossed my path and changed my life. And I'd just like to read it to you first before we actually get into the homily. I would like to beg you, dear sir, as well as I can, to have patience with everything unresolved in your heart, and to try to love the questions themselves as if they were locked rooms or books written in a very foreign language. Don't search for the answers, which could not be given to you now because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Live the questions now, and perhaps then someday far in the future, you will gradually, without even noticing it, live your way into the answer. My husband is just doing great now. The recovery has been good, and life's answer is just revealed without anything but my getting out of the way. It's time to hear from our most beautiful inside out reader, Shawna Summers, who's going to be reading from the book, excerpts from the book, From Stress to Stillness by Gina Lake. Thank you for reading today, Shawna.
Thank you, Reverend Susan. I'm humbled and honored to be a part of your first homily. So I'm assuming you can hear me well. I have my headphones on. Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay. Gina Lake's From Stress to Stillness. Everyone knows how to be present because everyone knows how to pay attention. Being present simply means giving our full attention to whatever is happening here and now, rather than being lost in our thoughts. Being present is being aware of reality, noticing what's being experienced by our body and senses. We can also be present to our more subtle internal experiences, such as intuitions, urges, feelings, and thoughts. When we're present to our thoughts, we are witnessing them rather than identifying with them. We notice a thought and then move on to noticing what else is showing up in the moment. When we are present, we notice everything in our experience. Our awareness moves around, taking in the entirety of what is being experienced without getting stuck in the mind's virtual reality. The alternative to being present is being identified with the voice in our head. We all know what that's like. When that happens, we could have eaten an entire piece of cake or walked 2 blocks without noticing anything about the experience. We were lost in the virtual reality of our thoughts. We were still able to function. We ate and walked, but we weren't present to the experience that our body was having. It's as if we didn't have that experience. Many of us live most of our lives in the state of non-contact with reality. We are asleep to the aliveness and richness of reality, cut off from our essence, our soul, a prisoner to our egoic mind. Everyone moves in and out of being present throughout the day. Our attention moves back and forth between being present and being lost in our inner world. Our thoughts are part of reality, but they have the unique ability to draw us into a virtual reality that then colors and at times covers over the experience of the present moment. Like no other aspect of reality, our thoughts draw us out of reality into an alternative reality. This alternative reality is the cause of suffering, as it is the source of our negative feelings. It is the source of the false self. Being focused mentally isn't always a place of suffering, however. Being absorbed in mental tasks, such as reading, planning, watching a movie, or playing a video game, is generally enjoyable, unless the egoic mind is wanting to do something else, complaining, or being judgmental. Whether we suffer or not as a result of being involved in the mind depends on whether we're involved with the egoic mind or simply using our mind to work or play. As fun as it is to use our mind, if these activities aren't balanced by contact with reality, we'll feel drained and ungrounded. In order to feel good, balanced, and whole, we need contact with reality, which requires being in our body and senses. When we shift from being mentally focused for a long time to being externally focused and in contact with reality, we experience an aliveness, a juiciness, and a beauty that can't be matched by virtual reality. Being present renews and energizes us. This is why meditation is so refreshing and particularly necessary in our world, where we spend so much time plugged in to either our egoic mind or our technological devices. Many of us don't fully appreciate the richness of reality because we go from involvement with the ego's virtual reality to the virtual reality of our iPads, TV, and movies, with very little time spent actually smelling roses. Being involved in the virtual reality created by our thoughts about ourselves is especially exhausting. Many of us are worn out, not so much because of what we do, but because of all the emotions that are generated by listening to our egoic mind while we're doing what we do. We may think that listening to our mind helps us accomplish things, but more often it drains us, particularly if those thoughts result in negative feelings. We need contact with reality. The illusion of the false self is a tricky one. If the illusion weren't a clever one, it would be seen through much more easily, but it's not. The challenge is to stop trusting our egoic mind and begin to trust something else that is more subtle and yet much more real than thoughts. Our true being is here, living this life, and always has been the only thing living this life. Yet all the while, we have supposed ourselves to be someone or something else. We mistook the character and the roles we are playing for our true identity. But it's time now for many of us to recognize that we are much more than this character, and that our being has just allowed us to believe we were this character. The way this ruse was perpetrated and is maintained was by programming us to believe that our thoughts were our thoughts. Believing these thoughts caused us to be a certain way in life. They caused us to respond and react in the various ways our character does. If our thoughts define us as a victim, we feel like a victim and behave like one. If our thoughts define us as incompetent, we feel incompetent, and that may be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If our thoughts say we have reason to be afraid, we feel afraid. If our thoughts push us to hurry and get a lot done, we do that and get stressed out. If we believe our thoughts, then they define us and determine our experience of life, how we feel, and what we do. We are in many respects a puppet to our conditioning, to our thoughts and feelings, when we believe them. When we are identified with them and believe them, we are at the mercy of them. They run the show. If our thoughts are benevolent, wise, trustworthy, and good guides for how to live, then believing them will lead to a very different life than what our programming generally leads to. To discover the nature, truth, and value of this programming, just notice the results of following it in your own life, in other people's lives, in our society, and in our world. If our programming were benevolent and wise, we would be happy, loving, and at peace, or at least more so, and there would be no need to seek greater peace. When you become very familiar with your thoughts and begin to question and examine them, you discover they are a jumble of useful, useless, true, untrue, and contradictory information. They are beliefs, judgments, and opinions, many of them unfounded. They are desires, wishes, hopes, likes and dislikes, fears and worries. Simple observation and commentary about whatever is being experienced. Yes, our thoughts contain some helpful information, but they contain little else that is needed or helpful. And I would even argue that the helpful information is something we already know and don't need to be reminded of by our thoughts. When our identities and actions are based on such thoughts, is it any wonder that so many people have lives that are full of stress, drama, confusion, and disappointment? When I first realized this about my thoughts, I was stunned that I hadn't seen it sooner. Once we begin to really look at what the egoic mind tells us day after day, which tends to be much the same, it becomes obvious that we've been following a false master. Fortunately, there's a better way to live, a truer way, and we are meant to discover that. The way to do that is by first questioning to see the truth about your thoughts, which is something you have to see for yourself. You have to do this investigation yourself, moment by moment, as you live your life. And nothing, no amount of reading or study can take the place of this investigation. One must learn to live in the question of, is this true? And that's the reading for today. Thank you, Susan.
Oh, thank you so much, Shawna. Beautifully read. You sound a lot like Gina Lake as she reads her teachings, which is a beautiful compliment to you both. Please join me now in prayer. Dear God, may our minds know your peace and never waver. May our hearts know your love. May we dwell in you, eternally changeless, and you in us, eternally changeless, no matter what. Amen. I want to start this morning with a story. It's a once upon a time kind of story. And in this one, there lived two frogs in the faraway land of Japan, one of whom made his home in this stinky little old ditch near the town of Osaka on the seacoast, while the other dwelt in a clear little stream which ran through the city of Kyoto. Well, at such a great distance apart, they'd never even heard of each other before, but oddly enough, the idea came to both of them at the same time that they wanted to get out of their swamps and streams and see a little of the world, and that they really should get out and be somebody of importance and esteem so that they could live their lives as well-lived frogs. And the frog that lived in Kyoto wanted to visit Osaka, and the frog that lived at Osaka wanted to visit Kyoto, and that's where the great Mikado had his palace, you see, so everything sounded great to both of them. So one fine morning in the spring, they both set out along the road that led from Kyoto to Osaka, one from one end and one from the other. And the journey began half-hearted, pretty well-heartedly, but it was a little more tiring than they expected because they didn't know too much about traveling. And halfway between the two towns, they came across a large, large mountain which had to be climbed. And it took each of them a really long time and a great many hops to get to the top. But there they were at last at the end of the day. And what was the surprise of each? To see another frog before him. They looked at each other for a moment without speaking. And then they fell into this wonderful conversation. They each started by explaining the cause of their meeting so far from their homes and found out they were connected in a lot of ways. And it was delightful to find that they both felt the same wish. And, since there was no real hurry, they stretched themselves out in a cool, damp place and enjoyed the sun together. And one day turned into another as they took respite up there on the mountain, connecting with the earth and the sky and the tasty mountain mosquitoes and bonding with each other. Some days they spent in quiet meditation, reflecting on this sanctuary they were in. And some days they shared contemplations of the aliveness in simply being frogs with no agendas. Other days were full of fun. They played things like, hopscotch, leapfrog, frog stuff. There were problems on the mountain in the form of predators like snakes and birds and things to look out for. And there was monsoons from time to time that could have washed them away at any moment. But overall, this quieter, monotask lifestyle offered them such gentle, natural wonder that the effort and the noise of the familiar city life that they were in just disappeared. Life seemed good here. And then there were days when life was a little rough, but most days life was easy and it was quite neutral for the frogs. They loved it all, as they recognized in their own hearts that in the quiet of the mountain, they were filled with a joy they'd never been aware of before. And so it is to let go of the dream, allowing everything to reveal. Until one day, a thought popped into the mind of the Osaka frog right out of the blue. And it grew quite large and it grew quite emotional quite fast. "What a pity we're not bigger," he said. "For then we could see our destinations from here and tell if it's even worth our while to go on." "Oh, well," jumped the Kyoto frog. Get it? Jumped in. "That's easily managed. I have an idea. We have only got to stand up on our hind legs and hold on to each other, and then we can each look at the town he's traveling to." Well, this idea pleased the Osaka frog so much that he at once jumped up and he put his front paws on the shoulder of his friend who had also risen up. And there they both stood, stretching themselves as high as they could go and holding each other tightly so that they might not fall down. The Kyoto frog turned his nose toward Osaka, and the Osaka frog turned his nose toward Kyoto. But the foolish things forgot that as they turned their heads, yes, they were pointed in the direction of the town in which they wanted to go. But when they stood up, their great eyes lay in the backs of their heads to behold only the place from which they had come. Dear me, cried the Osaka frog. Kyoto is exactly like Osaka. It's certainly not worth such a long journey. I believe I'll just go home. If I had any idea that Osaka was only a copy of Kyoto, I should never have traveled all this way, exclaimed the frog from Kyoto. And as he spoke, he took his hands from his friend's shoulders and they both fell backwards into the grass. Then they took a quick, impulsive look around at this heavenly respite that they'd been inhabiting for so long. And with a stressful but polite farewell of each other, they each set off to their familiar swamp in their same city. And to the end of their lives, they dwelled only on the certainty that Osaka and Kyoto, which are as different to look at as two towns can be, were as alike as two peas. But mostly, they forgot all about how they lived so fully on that mountain with such joy. They lived through the questions of who, what, when, why, and where they always are. Well, that's a once upon a time story, which is also a story of now. And it's a story about how we often tend to get so quickly caught up by thoughts and stress and our emotions, how quickly we lose sight of what's real, what's relevant. What we want are certain answers, and we do resist any growth when we're in that state of consciousness. We focus on what the mind tells us, and we become lost. So the human condition is that we often forget to observe and live what matters, what speaks to the heart of us. And we can get so caught up in our mental activity and all the false certainty that comes with it that we forget to observe, like the two frogs, the everyday questions we're being offered about living into who we are, into what's here to guide us, and even why we came. And that's all right, because this isn't to say that we don't also experience this miraculous balance of extreme moments when clarity rushes in and points us inward. We saw it happen to the frogs when they leaned into their hearts and lingered on that mountaintop together, right? Just enjoying whatever happened each day. It was pretty much an effortless effort to just stay and bask in the cool, damp wonder of the mountaintop. And in these moments, thought can disappear as our heart just bursts open to inner wisdom. You know what I'm pointing at. We all know these moments of extreme clarity, and when we give our attention to these moments, and sometimes even the memory of them, we can experience them very clearly without effort. Like when a child is born, or someone dear to us is dying, or when your puppy rolls over and smells so good and gazes into your eyes and begs for a belly rub, or when we see or hear or sense something really wonderful. In these moments, somehow we can become effortlessly unstuck from thought. But for what appears to be huge chunks of time, let's face it, most of us find ourselves time and again on automatic, and we forget to notice or question. Huge chunks of time, it's as if there's these long seasons of our life when we're merely moving through the day and navigating by an autopilot. And sometimes it just seems to get us through the day, or so it seems. And I have to wonder with you this morning if at the end of our lives, looking back, we might actually see and recognize this whole section of time that we've lived is really one big story or a dream we've made up as we go. Is it? It's important to stop and question this, even with the intention to be meaningly focused and present. Most of us really do spend a lot of time in a dream. We really do, meaning momentarily the way we see our world just shrinks and our attention fixates on other things like fears, like fleeting thoughts that come in, like, am I missing out? And all these anticipations and expectations about what comes next. And sometimes we're afraid too of leaving something behind, and we forget the questions, the mystery that we're living here right now, that's living and emanating through us, that's growing us, guiding us, and leading us with all of this sanctuary and light, no matter what. When we find ourselves stuck in the world of doubt and resistance, and I can say this with personal experience, we get really small. I'm going to tell you something. Since this is my first time to offer a homily, it kind of came together at the last minute for reasons that don't matter. And Wednesday, I realized that I was going to give the homily this week. And the topic came really easily to me because, as I mentioned beforehand, that was one that was really a life changer for me, total game changer in my spiritual journey. So it came to me on Wednesday. I made some notes and made a framework. And then I received more inspiration on Thursday. And on Friday, I decided that I wouldn't even look at my notes all day long, took a little break until Friday night. And I sat down Friday night and I looked at my framework and I looked at my notes and I said, this is terrible. Oh my gosh, I can't do this. The clock is ticking now. So my mind was telling me all of a sudden, as I sat there, I was really certain that I would have to completely start over, completely make new notes, maybe even change my topic. And I was more stuck than ever in this certainty of failure and resistance. Oh. And yet the basis of my entire message was how to live in the questions of now. So it occurred to me at that point, some point of clarity hit me that night, that the universe was actually conspiring for me with all of this resistance as I was being asked to not just prepare this homily, but to really live it, to live the questions of now. So Friday night, as I sat there trying to make the mind pilfer through all this wisdom I'd been gifted, I had to smile through all of that ego blast of thought. There was an awareness all of a sudden of being very tired and not even needing these thoughts that were causing me stress. So I just went to bed about 8 o'clock that night, asked God for a gentle sleep and for Spirit to meet with me in the morning, which I knew He would. No question, prayer does come through our questions and rarely through the mind's answers, if ever. So what we look at, what we find if we look really carefully and question the dream is that at times we really work ourselves really hard to mentally create some sense of should, little framework to fit in. I should be doing or saying this, or even creating our ideas of how we can steer life the way we want, the way it should go. We're always using chunks of time to try to get ourselves to feel more comfortable and familiar with what could happen. Boy, do we spend time trying to make that work. We're trying to make ourselves feel better and secure about a future scenario that doesn't exist. I wonder sometimes if we're afraid that if our mind's ideas play out, it will say everything about who and what we are. That's a scary thought. And it's a big deal to the ego, right? Thoughts offer us nothing except some specific ideas about how we want our dreams to be. And it seems like we give a lot of effort to be steered by them and letting thoughts navigate us on the path. Frankly, really, it's exhausting trying to keep up with all of these ideas and illusions of who we are and trying to present that to the world. This is a topic we hear all the time, but it's so good to hear it in a different voice, in different ways, and never to let go of it. So here's a thought. Speaking of thoughts, let's stop the cycle of mental chatter so we can question what's already here. Stopping the cycle, stopping the mind's conditioning. Again, this isn't pivotal new groundwork for listening for spirit in the questions, but it's sure worth repeating, worth reminding each other of a lot. Because this is slow work. It's a lot of practice. It's lots of showing up and doing what makes sense to do next. It's lots of taking our time with little incremental steps, and yet with very little stress, very little frustration, with a journey that really is a lot of fun without that stress. It takes us wherever it takes us. It's fun. We don't know today where it will take us tomorrow. We're simply following the path, pointing in the direction of Osaka, pointing in the direction of Kyoto, pointing in a direction of a potential with no weight of having to imagine anything about what we see as an outcome. It's all right. It's all right, no matter what. And that is what living the questions is. It's presence. It's stressless effort. It's waking up on a new day, fresh, ready to listen for the still small voice of God and just be with that, no matter what. And I guarantee you, the stressless effort that we're putting into this adventure we're on will take us a lot farther than tying a big full knot around an outcome. We will do better in a space of enjoyment and possibility and anything goes than we ever would be by efforting ourselves in some importance. This past year, I've taken in 2 puppies into our lives. About a year and a half ago, I got my first one, but we took in another one. And this was kind of our plan. They fill our house with such joy and energy you just wouldn't believe. Sometimes too much joy and energy, and people think I'm crazy for having 2 puppies. But one of them we love it. One has the potential to be a great therapy dog, to go with me to hospitals and nursing homes, which is a joy and a service that I've done in the past and would love to do again. So this is the plan for now anyway. And we're taking steps in that direction. So anywho, I wanted to give you an idea of how it goes in my house in dog training. This is life. Pete, come. Yes, good boy. Now stay. So I take 1 step forward and 1 step back. Yes, good. Praise, praise, praise. Stay. I take 2 steps forward and 2 steps back. Oh, yes, good boy. Stay. I take 3 steps forward and turn around. He runs toward me. Whoops. So here's the kicker. All I do is say, let's try that again. Stay. I take 2 steps forward, turn around. Good, stay, Pete. He stays. Come. He runs to me and sits. Yes, do an inner happy dance. Good boy. Now let's see if you can do it again. That's my house. This is now for him and for me, both a question and an answer of effortless, joy-filled effort. Neither one of us are stressed. Question, is that hard work? Answer, not at all. It's fun. There's a great metaphor I ran across for how life works and our illusion of needing to work really hard to accomplish our dreams. You know, we often like to watch ourselves as if we're the movie star in this show of life, you know, sitting on a horse, pulling at the reins and working hard to get the horse to do this and that. You know the scene. Yet when the camera pulls away, what we see is that we, the actor, are actually sitting on a rocking horse, and the rocking horse is sitting on a barge being carried by the river. Isn't that a wonderful example of allowing and the awareness, watching awareness flow? I was sharing that metaphor yesterday when I got my hair cut, and my hairdresser is pretty open-minded, but she came across with the rebuttal of, wait a minute, forget the horse. What if the river isn't going where we want it to go? Well, that's a question. Yeah, what if it isn't? You know, just like with the frogs, the mind starts going again. We forget why we came. It's desperate, that mind, to steer the conversation and pretend to be certain and in control. And when we choose to follow that mind, again, just like with the frogs, our world as we see it turns small. There's a better question, and it's found deep within the flow of the river, and it's very simple, and it's always available to turn to. Here it is. What is within our power and what is not? What is true? This is the step inward again, isn't it? Questioning, living in question, allows us to go deeper into the question. It points us deeper in wisdom and truth. Will anxiety and effort change the course of the river, or will we do better by showing up in the moment and responding to what shows up? If I can skirt around a rock if need be, or move a log that gets in the way, or paddle during a slow stretch and enjoy the scenery at each turn, this is being with life as it unfolds, and it's being inspired by the potential without living in the disappointment of failing at a card game we ourselves have made up. We might succeed, we might not. It's all right. We're learning to live the questions. There is no way to know today what's in the cards for the future. The inspiration, the possibility will carry us forward. That's how on Friday night, awareness uncovered the fear and anxiety my thoughts were bringing into this homily. We know those energies don't help. When we let questions point to the truth, we show up at each phase and we let inspiration propel the current. And whatever the outcome, we know that all is good and better than when we started, if simply for the divine energy that's given and received in doing it. So we're living the question of now, and our false self is no longer at stake. Our core cannot be harmed, and I will keep working with Pete, and we'll learn, both of us, more each day. And maybe he'll be a therapy dog, maybe not, but either way, we've won by simply slowing down to live the questions and join the journey. This is Ramana Maharshi. None can confront and overcome the mind. Ignore it then as something false. Know the self as real ground and stand firm rooted in it. Then the mind's movement will gradually subside. You know, Mary Oliver wrote a poem called The Summer Day. And in this one, she examines the questioning of everything that rises through the lens of our day. And she suggests that we fill our chunks of time appreciating life by trusting where the questions might one day lead us. So after spending the summer day, a summer day, kneeling prayer-like in a field in contemplation of a single simple grasshopper, she asked, "Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Life is meant to be wild and free. We only experience this completely when we recognize thought and ignore it, living in the questions of our experiences. What we long for is to bask for as long as it takes in the question of who we are. Live in the questions now. Come on, frogs. Live in the questions now and let the strength and clarity of God's grace rise to meet you. Simply be who you already are. It's all right. I want to thank you for your loving presence, your questioning hearts, and your kind attention. We've got the Traveling Wilburys up next, leading us out on an upbeat. And if you feel called to make a donation to this wonderful organization of Awakening Together, Sina will have a link posted in the chat board for you to do so. Thank you, my friends. All right, all right, all right. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share other than our being frogs together here in this planet in the moment? Shawna just posted an icon of a happy frog face. That's awesome. Great. Oh, I forgot this part. I guess I need to thank you all once again for joining us on another Sunday gathering at Awakening Together. It was such a joy to be here today. I'm so grateful for the hearts of all of you, and I wish you a wonderful Sunday. Thank you.
You've been watching our online gathering. It happens weekly on Sundays at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. To join us live in the sanctuary, visit our website, awakening-together.org. You'll want to click on Online Sanctuary in the main menu, and then in the drop-down menu, look for How to Enter the Sanctuary. Right there at the top of the page is a clickable link. We'd love to see you in the sanctuary and join with you in fellowship. Thank you again for watching. Also, please know that if you'd like to stay connected via the Awakening Together channel here on YouTube, you can subscribe and hit the bell for more notifications. We hope to see you in the sanctuary.